We have a gospel reading this morning. We've been in the book of Matthew according to the lectionary series for 2019. But this morning we're going to switch and we're going to take a look at what Luke has to say about this particular day. And so I'll be reading from Luke chapter 9, verses 28 to 36. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter, John, and James and went up to the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which was about to be accomplished in Jerusalem. Now, Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep. But since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make some dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified, and they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one of any of the things they had seen. On the next day, when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met them. "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son. He's my only child." And this ends the reading of the Gospel of Luke. Thanks be to God. As we begin our contemplation time this morning, I invite you to grab that big blue book one more time and open back up to page 75. And the reason, we're going to just sing one verse, the first verse, but I would like you to read the words and not just sing the melody like so often we do when we know an old tune. This is the beauty of the denominational Christian churches here and abroad. Particularly the churches that follow some sort of liturgical pattern, which is what Presbyterians do. And if you look at this song choice, it can't help but to illumine in your minds that music is prayer and music is pertinent to the ancient stories that are told in this book of the Bible. So, would you join me right where you are? You can stay seated. Margie, give us an intro and we'll join you. Just saying, that's what I just read. Do you see the beauty of that? I hope you do. I shouldn't say do you. I invite you to see the beauty of hymns and church music because it does add a layer of depth and understanding because music speaks to the heart. And so I think whoever wrote this particular hymn, we say thank you because it illumines this morning. Coming back to the Bible this morning as well. A mountaintop experience. We hear about that. We talk about it. I guess if I ask for a show of hands, there might be some, I hope there might be a lot of you that say, yeah, been there, experienced that. Obviously, we're not talking literally this morning, or we are. Anybody, climb up the top of, a peak, Mount, oh, Della, you did, bless your heart. Was it indeed a mountaintop experience?
Yes.
Yeah. What about it? Well said, sister. It was too high. So there was, okay. And am I hearing that there was a little fear in that or no?
There was, but I don't think so.
Okay, there you go. And Della just preached the first part of my sermon this morning. Anytime you step out and you climb, or you walk for that matter, in the Huron National Forest and you get lost, or anytime you go down a different path and you step out to something you have not experienced exactly like that before, there has to be some kind of fear and trepidation, a little bit, even if you're a tough guy. Okay, I can do it. I don't care. I'm going to make it to the top. Yeah, right. And inside you're going, okay, I certainly hope I do, right? So there are mountaintop experiences. And the first reaction is curiosity, perhaps, unknown. Then it can change, particularly in a mountaintop climb, the higher you get, the little bit scarier it gets. Della says, that was too high. It's like, what am I doing up here? And I suppose you had a choice to kind of hang back or, call it off. I know her well enough. She's not calling it off. She's just powering through it. There you go. And yeah, that would be Julie, I'm sure. Yeah, and sometimes you get a push from behind that says, go, Mom, you can do it, right? Nonetheless, mountaintop experiences aren't our everyday happening. Well, as we read this morning, it wasn't the disciples' happenings either. Now, there's something that's interesting to me. I thought about this week. Why did Jesus, and it said he took them, if you noticed what we read in the gospel. It didn't say they came along with him. The gospel text says Jesus took with him Peter, John, and James. Anybody curious? I'm like, why them? There was 12 of them. Why them? Well, we'll find out in a minute here this morning, perhaps some rationale. Nonetheless, it was only 3 of the disciples that he asked, commanded almost nicely, to take with him up onto this mountaintop. Now, we know Jesus knew exactly what was going to happen because that's why he went there. But he told his guys, I'm going there to pray. It's the next thing the gospel said. We're going to pray. And so, picture yourself as one of the 3. You have heard him do this. You have seen him go places like this all the time during his ministry. It is a no-brainer. Sometimes Jesus goes off and prays. So they were probably pretty comfortable at the start. And there's not much talking that's going on the journey up because Jesus is focused and he's going for a purpose. They get to the top, as the text says this morning, and Jesus closes his eyes, probably, and begins to pray. And here's our guys. Have you heard this before? I'm kind of tired, getting a little, man, it took a lot out of us to get up here. Jesus is over there praying. Maybe we can catch 40 winks. And before they could do that, boom! We don't know. Was it just light? Was it sound? What grabbed their attention? And it certainly took hold of them because very shortly after that, the guys fell on the ground because they couldn't look at whatever it was that was going on there in that vision. Mountaintop experiences, they happened a lot in the Bible, and Dell is my one and only proof this morning that they still happen today. Moses, how'd you like to see a burning bush on top of a snowy mountain? Got his attention. And what happened? He couldn't look at God's face either. But here's the deal. Moses was changed when he came down that mountain. Right? We know from this morning's gospel text that everybody was changed when they came down that mountain, not just Jesus. So here we start exploring that word transfigure. Transfiguration means the event. To transfigure means this: to maintain an essence while changing, in this case from the Greek, of the face. We can translate that today to outward appearance. But there still is the difference between transformation. You know, we're going up a notch here this morning, so put on your biblical heads and go with me. Okay? Transformation, we can understand. It means to change from one thing into another. Do you get the subtlety there? All right? Thus, when I go down the aisle, and I don't know why, I go to the puzzles in Walmart. That's why I'm going there, to get puzzles for the home group. And I always end up in the Transformer aisle. Now, I don't know how many years ago, but that was the hottest thing. Every kid in the universe wanted Transformers. Any of you grandparents get the Christmas list from the daughter or the son that said, Mom, Dad, you got to get them this kind of Transformer. Yeah. And what's that about? It's about it comes out and it looks like a red racing car. I'm making this up. I don't have a personal collection. Okay? So, you got the car. It's like, wow, that's a great car. Watch this, Grandma. And out comes this red standing up robot with arms and legs and a head and eyes, and kids get transformation. So you can use that larger word with little people, and I guarantee you they will understand what that means. It means to change from one thing to another or into another. Now, let's go back to transfigure. Transfigure means that the essence of Christ, the essence of Jesus, did not change. Okay? But his outward appearance did. He didn't have to take and transform his arms and his legs and have, basically not a whole lot recognizable, because let's go back to the text now. What did it say? It said that Peter, James, and John recognized Moses and Elijah. Okay? If that was a transformation, they would not be able to recognize who or what they were. It was a transfiguration because the essence of who they were remained the same and their outward countenance changed. Still recognizable. I think that is amazingly beautiful. Personal bias. I think that there's a lot of food for thought about that. Because do you go around saying, well, gee, that person is transfigured? And the neighbor goes, excuse me? No, we don't use that in our everyday language. But get that difference. So what happened is, Jesus prayed, and it was ordained by God that he would, why did he do this? To show the boys, to show those three guys a taste, a little glimpse of what their lives would become. Ding, 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 ding. That's called hope. He gave those three a visual image to say, your life as it is in Israel and Jerusalem right now, following me around trying to convince people that I'm the real thing, is not all there is. In fact, there's so much more that I can't begin to show it to you. So what I'm going to do this morning, fellas, is I'm taking you with me, and I'm going to the mountaintop where holy things happen. Did anybody else use the term holy moments? This was a holy moment. This was a holy moment. I'm taking my three buddies with me, and I am going to let you see that when your ordinary life is done, this is about 1/32 of an inch of what your new life is going to look like. I guarantee you, after that mountaintop experience, seeing Jesus changed into who he really was as God, that they couldn't look at because the light was so brilliant, they never forgot the fact that he indeed was Jesus, the Messiah, Son of God. And what's the exclamation point on this story this morning? Boom! The cloud encompasses all of them. So they're all, I don't know, think of it as being in fog where you're afraid to move the car even like a quarter of an inch down the road because you're blind as a bat, as they say, right? That fog is so dense that you start to fear again a little bit, that if I move anywhere at all, I am liable to have an accident. So you kind of go slow, slow, slow while the fog is surrounding you. You can't look right, you can't look left, you certainly can't look forward. The rear view mirror doesn't help you out, so there you are. Think of that as the space that those three men were in. At the same time, they're lying now face down, and the cloud comes, and they kind of look up and go, oh, is this it? That's what I would have thought. It doesn't write that in the text. But if that happened to me and the cloud descended, or whatever it was that happened up there in that vision, I would go, I'm coming, Elizabeth. I mean, I'm thinking this is it. You see, and what happens is they only hear, maybe in their heart, maybe in, we don't know, but what they hear and put in their heart is God the Father, God, the first part of that Trinity, say, this is my son. You can't get any other first-hand information than that. You're on the top of the mountain. You've just seen this thing you cannot explain, but you are transfigured into something that receives it. And then you hear the voice say, this is my son. And it doesn't say, in whom I am well pleased. That happens at another point in the biblical story. He says, what does Luke say and Matthew says it this morning? Both of them. They say that God says, this is my son, listen to him. Boom. Listen to him. Now, I guarantee you that those guys would listen differently to Jesus when they came down from that mountaintop. And so the transfiguration happened to all of them up there. Let's answer the question perhaps about why just the three of them. Because God had the ultimate plan. And it was Peter, although John eventually speaks to this, but I want to read you, excuse me, this morning, Peter's second letter written in the Bible, in the first chapter, and I'm going to read at verse 16. And again this morning, I'm trying to get you to see that everything that is in these texts are relatable, not just to you, but to past experience and past readings and testimony. And in the end, if you have transfigured yourself into the presence of God, had a holy moment, you are willing to see this book differently. Here's what Peter says, probably, years later. For we did not follow cleverly devised myths when we made known to you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we had eyewitness of his majesty. I screwed that up. Let me read it again. Okay? For we did not follow cleverly devised myths, I'll say stories, about the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we had eyewitness to his majesty. What's Peter referring to? The transfiguration experience on the top of the mountain. All right? It says, for he received honor and glory from God the Father, that when the voice was conveyed to him by the majestic glory, it said, this is my Son, my beloved, listen to him. We ourselves heard this come from heaven while we were with him on the holy mountain. Boom! It comes back. God had ordained that these three guys, and not all 12, for some reason these three guys would be the leaders and the writers who would be able to translate that unspeakable mountaintop experience into language that the people could understand. And if it was too bizarre to believe, then look at me, I'm Peter. And I was there, and I witnessed it. So if you can't believe my story, believe in me that I have a first-hand eyewitness account. Wouldn't that make a difference to you? Sure. If you trusted and believed that they were there, you had proof that he was there, it would carry some more weight. That's why Peter, James, and John were chosen only to have that mountaintop experience this morning. Okay, so what about us? Do we care? Absolutely. We better care. Mountaintop experiences happen rarely in our lives, but they do happen. And I would charge you this week, as you're looking at the snow out the window and have time to meditate, that you look back over the good, the bad, the ugly, and the unexplainable. Good, bad, ugly, unexplainable in your life. And we all come with a huge packet of those experiences by this time in our lives. And then I ask you to look and say, what changed me about that experience? Maybe look at more than one. But I will guarantee you that when you have had those kind of extreme experiences, it's certainly illness. I mean, all around us, right? We're all struggling. We're struggling to move down the road. But what about that particular event? I mean, and I know she'll allow me to do this. Jan, I'm looking at Jan. You know, struggle. We all struggle. And she has a cancer diagnosis, and she goes through all of these weeks and months of treatment. And she comes to church when she almost can't walk, and people are, you shouldn't be here. Is that right, Jan? Yeah, she's shaking yeah. Yeah, you shouldn't be here. You know, look at it. And she says to me, so I can speak for this and myself, you'll have to speak for yourselves. And she says, I need to be here. That's what she said to me. I need to be here. And guess what? Through the grace of God and certainly some help of her friends, she is here. She's sitting in the pew, and we are right to say cancer-free. She's shaking her head, yeah. The journey is over. Now, I'm suspecting that she is transfigured by that experience. The essence of Jan Kamrath is still there. I can see it on her face. We know, if you know her well, we know who she is. We know her heart. We know how she helps. We know she doesn't complain. She gets up and she does. And that never went away. But I'm pretty sure that God revealed things to her through that experience that didn't transform, because it's still Jan, but it did transfigure how she sees God, how she looks at God, how she looks at you, how she can empathize with you. That's what happened that Sunday morning. I don't know. It wasn't a Sunday morning. It was probably on the Sabbath, probably Saturday. He probably took them up there on Saturday. Could have been Tuesday. Who cares? The point is, that's why this story is here today, so that you can take it out of here and say, wow, how did God transfigure me during this experience or that experience? And even more physically, have you ever seen somebody, a mom, who is probably one of your daughters or, the family, transfigured when the birth of their child, the first time they held that infant little baby, and you were looking at because you wanted to hold them, I'm sure that was part of it, but the first time the mom took hold, or the dad, a little bit more nervous about that, and they held that new life, if you were looking at their face, I will tell you their face was transfigured. There is something about that ultimate new life that is God power, folks. So, look in your life this day and see how transfigured you are. It sounds like an ugly term. It's not like the guy with the mask. It's not that. It's transfiguration can be an amazingly stark and beautiful experience, or it can be an amazingly stark and insightful experience. So, let's be transfigured by the work of your God.